So, Alita Battle Angel, the film that James Cameron has been talking about wanting to make since I was in junior high school. Now, when I remember hearing about this, I was kind of skeptical that this film would ever happen. Cameron kept saying, oh yeah, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. We're going to make this film. And it kept being pushed back for other stuff. You know, he was working on different films, under the sea documentaries and Avatar and all sorts of different films he was working on. So I never thought it would happen, especially since this came out. It's based on the manga and anime, and there were a lot of. It came out during a time when a lot of announcements were being made like that. Like you might remember around the time when Cameron was talking about this, they were talking about making a live action Evangelion movie, and that kind of didn't happen. Like the people behind it keep saying, "Oh yeah, it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen," but it's not quite gonna happen. Cameron, I could believe making Battle Angel happen into a film, but he had too much on his plate. Thankfully, though, he did get around to finishing up the screenplay, and he did pass it off to director Robert Rodriguez. And it's actually a pretty good choice, because I'm going to say this right out of the gate. This is probably, in terms of adapting an anime into an American film, this is probably the best one. And I know that's kind of like a low bar to cross, but this is probably the most faithful, the most fun, the most dark, the most true to the character. This is pretty much as good as it's probably going to get for an anime adaptation. So for those who've never seen Battle Angel, I think you might be able to find it someplace. I think it was like out of print for a while, but Battle Angel is essentially about this teenage cyborg that was found in a scrap junkyard in this kind of junky surface world, where the elites live in like this towering, floating city in the sky that dumps all their trash down onto the poor people. And so you have Dr. Ito, played by Christoph Waltz. He happens upon this teenage cyborg who is only from about yay here from up there is left. So only kind of like the brain and the face and some of the upper torso is left there, and he basically brings her home and gets her a new body. Now, Ito is known around the neighborhood as kind of the resident kind of cyborg doctor. He helps out with people who have missing limbs and need enhancements and stuff like that. And he's like, oh, pay me later. He's the kindly cyborg doctor. And Alita slowly starts to figure out kind of who she is and what environment she's in. She has no memory of who she is, where she came from, which slowly comes about as she goes through the film. But then she also discovers, the ins and outs of how this, the lower world works here. How they have death sports, how they, how cyborgs, some of them are hunted down by bounty hunters. How there are sinister people working for the top, and how it seems just like a little bit of everyone is just a little bit corrupt in this society. Now, I was kind of worried about this film because I was worried oh man, it's PG-13. I wonder how far are they going to go with this? Because if you've watched the Battle Angel anime, it's very dark, and it's actually very depressing. Like it ends on a pretty grim note, like very grim. Like if you've ever seen the film, sorry, not the film. It's a 2-episode OAV series. It's very bloody. It's very brutal. You have people getting decapitated. You have people getting bifurcated. You have limbs being torn off. You have sexual affairs. You have a dog getting mutilated. You have someone having their body ripped to shreds and then just kind of like tossed over the side of a cliff. And I thought, there's no way they're going to do that with this film. But then I remember, oh, no, wait, this is Robert Rodriguez. And I'm glad that they pointed out in the trailer from the director of Sin City. Because he's kind of perfect for this. Like Rodriguez is kind of good at that kind of like more giddy, kind of more vicious violence that you've seen in stuff like Sin City. And for being a PG-13 film, he doesn't shy away from kind of the more grotesque nature here. Yeah, you do see people get decapitated. You do see people lose limbs. It gets pretty brutal at times. I'm surprised they got away with a PG-13 on this film. But more than anything, I was surprised how many beats that it follows from the anime so closely. You've got kind of the barroom brawl right on time. You have the murdering of a dog right on time. You have a tragic romance that happens between Alita and a human boy, and that's pretty much right on schedule too. It syncs up surprisingly well to the Battle Angel OVA. If you've ever watched it before, it's shocking how close it is. It even ends on the right note too, without going like too over the top here. And I know a lot of people are probably going to get to the end of this film, they're going to be like, "Oh, it feels like they only did half the film. Maybe it feels like they only told half the story." But no, they actually pretty much tell the whole story, which might lead to some people getting a little angry at it. Maybe like No Country for Old Men, thinking, "Oh, there's no ending here." But I gotta admit, the action scenes here are actually pretty damn good. You have Rosa Salazar is Alita with kind of like the big weird eyes here. Meant to kind of replicate that anime form. It's mostly a motion capture performance, though. They put all this crap all over her to make her look more like a cyborg, which works. It's a pretty good seamless job. There was a featurette they had after the film where they were relating it kind of to Avatar. It's kind of that same level, except they want to make it look more human. And I gotta admit, a lot of these action scenes with Alita, they're a lot of fun. And how they're staged, they're very brutal. They're very flashy. There's a lot of ouch-worthy moments, which, let's face it, Rodriguez is really good at that. After like Sin City and Machete, he's really good at making kills look surprising and vicious and violent, and it's actually pretty cool to see Alita as this woman who kind of like goes around like slicing people up with swords. She punches them hard. At one point, she's actually dissected in half and still manages to kill a cyborg, which is actually pretty cool. It's very weird, this film. A lot of the cyborgs are kind of over the top. They have ridiculous little add-ons to them. Like there's this big bulky guy who looks like he's got a tiny head and this huge cyborg body, and he's got these kind of bladed tentacles that come out and rip people up. It's very kind of over the top, but you do kind of feel that brutality throughout the film, and the darkness as well. And I love how there's a little bit of like expositional talk here, but most of the way that they reveal the world and Alita's past is kind of cleverly revealed. They do dice it up just enough to where you're not too bored with how they go about the story. And it's rather intriguing too. And mostly the fight scenes are the biggest draw here, which is great because Rodriguez does a good job of it. The weakest part of the film by far, and everyone I know is going to argue this point, is some of the acting and dialogue. A lot of the dialogue here is pretty basic. Like let's face it, Cameron has never been known for the best dialogue. Even though he's got a co-writer here, a lot of Cameron's influences in this film, mainly because he really loved the anime. And so you will get a few lines that sound a little bit corny, that sound a little bit too simple, like they're just kind of going through the motions. Like at one point, Alita is trying to like figure out a world by eating an orange, and so Ito's like, "Oh no, you gotta peel it, And then later she eats chocolate, and she loves chocolate, saying like, "Oh, this is my favorite food. We should have it for every meal." Little cute stuff like that, stuff that you kind of expect. It's very rampant in like in the first act of the film, where a lot of the dialogue is just trying to push a lot of the action scenes forward in order to push some of the histories forward. But I do like that they do maintain they do kind of like slowly reveal the corruption and just a little bit of everyone, that everyone here is lying just a little bit, so that when they reveal a lot of the character twists, which, let's be honest, most of them are probably going to be expected, even if you've never watched the anime. They're at least fun because they keep up with the pacing of all the action scenes and all the twisted nature of what's going on here. It does make a few little jumps in logic here, like you have Marshala Ali playing Vector, who's kind of this essentially kind of like a cyborg pimp of this area. He basically looks over parts and wants to like steal parts, and he's basically working for the people upstairs, but they use him as a literal puppet by possessing his body at certain points and having him talk, having basically his masters making sure he can talk directly to the other people that they're hiring to basically stop Alita, because Alita, they find out, oh, she's part of like some ancient technology and she's dangerous. We can't let her run around there, especially when she wants to play what's it called, motorball in here, which is essentially kind of like their pastime in this kind of like a junky version of the future. Is they have a sport called motorball, which is kind of like, it's kind of like if the Wachowski brothers, when they were directing Speed Racer, like if they directed Rollerball. Rollerball makes very little sense, and so does Motorball to an extent. I mean, if you can kind of relate it to, you know, kind of like roller derby type stuff, but it's just an excuse to have some like very, very fast action on a racetrack, which is fine because it works really well. I was surprised how much I love the action sequences here, how much I was getting into it, how visually the world looks great. It really got me into it, especially, yeah, I did see it in 3D. The 3D is okay. They do have a lot of those, a few moments where, like, you know, it comes at you at the screen, as they usually do with these 3D films. But hey, you know, if you're gonna do it that way, that's perfectly fine by me. I was not expecting this film to come out for a very long time, especially since it was pushed back originally from Christmas. And Cameron had been pushing this film back since forever. I was never expecting it to come out. I wasn't expecting it to come out, and I wasn't expecting it to be good either. But surprisingly, despite a little bit of wonky dialogue here and there, it's a very faithful adaptation. It knows when to go dark with the material, which it needs to. It knows when to go vicious and violent. At the same time, it knows when it needs to have fun, when it needs to have that Rodriguez element of just like kick butt action scenes. And like probably the highlight here is the bar brawl. That entire sequence is a lot of fun with all the different cyborg bounty hunters she meets, and they all have a big skirmish in there, and they're fighting each other, throwing punches and throwing chairs and slicing up each other. It's too much fun, and you can tell that Rosa Salazar playing Alita, she's having fun with this too. It's a kick butt action role, and it has, like I said, it has fun where it needs to, and it goes dark where it needs to, and it's a very faithful anime adaptation, or about as faithful as you can get for an American film. That it's surprising. It's not a great film. It's still got some wonky dialogue here and there, but the action scenes are great. The visuals are great. I was slowly getting into the characters, and I really got into its world. So it was a pretty surprising film. So for Alita, Battle Angel, 3.5 out of 5 stars.